This is my attempt at making a little van tour video. The first thing we're going to talk about is this cabinet here, which is kind of a complex cabinet. It is our kitchenette kind of storage. It has all of our electrical controls, storage for propane and dry goods, and our electrical cabinet, as well as our heater. To start off, the side here is 3 drawers. The drawers are on full extension drawer slides that I scavenged from a cabinet that I found on the side of the road. Top drawer has just some basic utensils and things like that. All the drawers have little locks on them so that they don't open up. The second drawer down here is just where we keep our pots, pans, cups, things like that. As you can see, everything's accessible without having to get in the van, which I like. The last one is for the stove. Originally, this was supposed to be something that you could set up and cook right here. I thought that'd be a cool idea, except then you can't go in and out of the cab when you're cooking, and this design kind of is predicated on you being able to go in and out, since the kitchen's neither inside nor outside. So I haven't quite figured out what I'm gonna do long term, but that's just where we store that. As you can see, the stove doesn't actually go in the bottom of a drawer. It kind of comes in the front, but there's a little screw there and a hole underneath there, so when this is closed, it can't lift off the screw and come out. Underneath here is where I'm going to install an inverter, so that we have access to 120 volt. It's close by to the battery, which is mounted down here on the frame rail. Again, that's a little low, so I need to mount that a little bit higher. The battery's not quite the right size for the box, so it needs a kind of lift bracket that I need to fabricate. On the right side of the cabinet, there are 2 cabinet doors. All the doors in the cabinet have these pull to open, slam to lock handles, so nothing flies open while we're driving around. In this, this is kind of like my dry goods, supplies kind of bag, kind of mess right now. I need to sweep out the cabinet. The other thing that I store in this cabinet is the propane tank. I have a little 5-pound, or I guess this is, 5-pound propane tank. This just supplies propane for the stove. It's great. It lasts weeks. And then the last thing is I have a water spigot. Oop, it's dripping a little bit. The water spigot here, let me show you how it works. Well, yeah, I'll show you how it works. So the water spigot, since it's not in a sink, I'm a little worried that it could turn on by things shifting around in this cabinet. So kind of as a safety lockout, that's the control for the spigot. It's got a switch built into it, but also a valve, so you can control the amount of flow. To kind of control that, we have this last switch here is the kind of water main power. And then it's going to be tricky to do one-handed. One second. So then, if you want water while you're inside the cab, you can just turn it on and off, and you got water. It's nice when you're making dinner because you could set the stove up wherever and the water is easily accessible. Again, turn that off, and then this no longer actuates the pump. So that another reason why I put this in here is to have it as far away from the outside of the van as possible. Running these lines interior to the van means they have less propensity to freeze, which is a big concern here in the winter. I don't want to have to be paranoid about winterizing the van because I use it often, but not for long periods of time. So it sits without anyone in it for quite a lot. The last door down here in this very complicated cabinet is my electrical panel. Fuse box cover is off. Let me slap that back on there. So down in here, I've got my solar charge controller, my high current bus, and my fuse block. So I've got the power from my battery coming in here to my high current bus. It then goes out to my charge controller, and then from the charge controller it gets distributed through my fuse bank. And so I've got the van basically split up into 4 quadrants. Each quadrant has its own fuse bank, and then the heater is on its own circuit as well. Keep the spare fuses in here. Probably should make a nice way to strap them down and everything. But just to kind of prevent dust, the door is also gasketed and slid in there. So the second element of the, well, here's kind of the inside perspective of the cabinet. So here we kind of have the control center, I guess you could say, of the van. So this is the controller for the E-Spar. Well, it's not E-Spar, it's a cheap Chinese knockoff diesel heater. That diesel heater, I don't have solar in the van right now, so the battery charges off of the alternator. With it charging off the alternator, I don't want it to drain the battery. So what I have here is a hard switch to turn the controlling unit on and off. So so right now it's on. What we can do is we can turn it on, and then it's set to a frequency mode. You can set it to a thermostat so it holds the van at a certain temperature, but I actually haven't played around with that yet. This van has a lot of windows, as you can see, and it's only lightly insulated, and with the heater on the lowest setting, any nights below, say, 20 degrees, or above 20 degrees, it's almost too much heat for the van. The output's right here, just a single output. You can rotate it any which way you'd like. Generally push it back there so it goes back towards the sleeping area of the van. I'll let that stay on so that it can boot up and we can show you the rest of the things. These next 3 switches, everything needs to get labeled, but they're not quite labeled yet, are the overhead lights for the van. So the first one are these kind of soft lights. You can't really see them too much in the day, but they're just the right amount of light to be comfortable at night. You can almost read under them, but one person could be sleeping while the other person could be moving about, and they're not a nuisance at all. I fabricated these lights. I'll talk a little bit more about them off some parts that I kind of hacked, and it was quite the project. So those are those lights. Then we have 2 banks of overhead lights. I call these my loading and unloading lights. I do a lot of group trips where people come in and we start it late, or we get back late. Either we get there or we get back late, and you need a lot of light to unload. 6 or 7 people's worth of stuff out of here. So that's these. They're kind of obnoxiously bright, and so having control over the front and rear independently means that you don't have to be abruptly waking someone up when they're trying to sleep or something like that. The last thing is a kind of charging station. So this quickly tells me kind of what my battery voltage is. It's got 2 USB charging ports to it. You can see that voltage is pretty low. It's probably because the glow plug on the heater is pulling draw on the battery. And then you have a 12-volt outlet as well. And so that you can turn on and off again so that we don't draw battery power and we don't need it. Yeah, and you can see this is starting to kick up now, starting to push out some air. It takes a little while to get up to temperature, but once it's up, it really starts to get the van warm fast.